"She's a woman. What the hell does she know about Overwatch?" Sergeant Marcus Hale said it loud. No whisper, no hesitation. The entire Raven Strike unit heard every word, and so did Emily Carter, standing 10 feet away, rifle case in hand, back straight, face unreadable. She didn't stop walking. She didn't turn around. She just kept moving, calm, deliberate, like a woman who had heard that exact sentence so many times it had stopped having edges. That one moment of arrogance would cost Marcus everything he thought he knew about strength, skill, and who gets to be dangerous. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Stay until the end. You won't regret it. The briefing tent smelled like dust and old coffee, and the air inside it was already charged before Emily Carter walked through the entrance. She had been awake since 4 in the morning. Not because nerves had kept her up, but because she always woke before dawn on the first day of a new assignment. Old habit. She used the quiet hours to read terrain maps, study elevation changes, and memorize the kind of small geographic details that most people never thought about, until those details were the only thing standing between them and a catastrophe. By the time the rest of Raven Strike's unit was pulling on boots and complaining about the chow, Emily had already walked the outer perimeter twice, identified 3 potential Overwatch positions, and calculated rough wind drift estimates for the valley below. She set her rifle case beside the entrance and found a seat near the back of the room. Nobody made space for her. That wasn't new. She had spent 11 years learning how to exist in spaces where her presence made people uncomfortable. She didn't take it personally anymore, or at least she had trained herself not to show it when she did. What she felt and what she allowed others to see were 2 entirely different things, and that discipline had been built slowly, mission by mission, through years of choosing silence over reaction and precision over impulse. Sergeant Marcus Hale stood at the front of the tent. He was a broad man, compact and dense with physical capability. The kind of person who carried authority. The way other people carried weight naturally, without thinking about it. He had the easy confidence of someone who had never seriously been wrong about anything that mattered to him. His unit respected him. They watched him the way soldiers watch leaders they believe in completely, and Marcus had never given them a reason to stop. How was going over the mission parameters, the convoy route, the estimated timing of movement, the communication windows. When the tent entrance shifted and Emily walked in, the room changed. It wasn't loud. It was subtle, the kind of atmospheric shift that happens when a group of people who have spent enough time together start reacting to the same stimulus without having to discuss it. Eyes moved, shoulders adjusted. A few men exchanged glances that carried entire conversations in half a second. Marcus paused. He looked at Emily for a long moment. Then he looked at the officer beside him, Lieutenant Colonel Webb, who had arranged the assignment, and something crossed his face that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite surprise. It was the expression of a man who had been expecting one thing and received another, and who had already decided the substitution was unacceptable. "That's our Overwatch sniper," Lieutenant Colonel Webb said. His voice was neutral, deliberate, the voice of a man who had fought this particular fight before and intended to win it again without drama. "Chief Petty Officer Emily Carter, Navy SEAL sniper. Her file is in your packet." Marcus didn't look at the file. "I read the file," he said. "Then you know her qualifications." "I know what's written in the file." The distinction was deliberate. Emily heard it. Everyone in the tent heard it. She kept her eyes forward and her hands still and said nothing. Marcus turned back to the map and continued the briefing as if the moment hadn't happened. But it had happened, and it sat in the room like a weight that wasn't going anywhere. After the briefing broke, the unit moved outside to load equipment and organize gear for the morning's movement. Emily collected her rifle case and began the methodical process she always followed before any mission. Not a ritual born of superstition, but a systematic protocol she had developed through careful attention to what had gone wrong for other snipers and what had gone right for her. She found a flat surface near the equipment vehicles and opened the case. The rifle was a Macmillan TAC 338, chambered for .338 Lapua Magnum. She had been shooting variants of this platform for 7 years. She knew its behavior in cold air and hot air, in humidity and dryness, after long periods of inactivity and after sustained use. She knew the specific tolerances of this particular weapon, not the specifications published in a manual, but the real-world characteristics she had learned through thousands of rounds and dozens of conditions that no manual could fully capture. She checked the barrel first, then the bolt assembly, then the trigger mechanism, which she had adjusted to a pull weight of 2 pounds 4 ounces, a setting that some shooters found too light and therefore dangerous, but that she found essential for the kind of sustained precision work where accumulated finger fatigue over a 4-hour window could be the difference between a hit and a miss. She was midway through this process when Corporal Danny Reyes appeared beside her. Reyes was 26 years old. He had been with Ravenstrike for 14 months, long enough to have absorbed the unit's culture completely. He carried himself with the easy physical confidence of young men who have been told they are exceptional and have chosen to believe it. "You know how to use that," he said. He said it the way people ask questions they already know the answers to, not because they want information, but because they want to see how you respond to being underestimated. Emily didn't look up. "I've fired it a few times." "Seriously though," Reyes said, "this isn't range work. The valley creates crosswinds that'll pull your round 3 feet off target at anything over 800 meters. The thermals in the afternoon are brutal, and the heat shimmer around midday makes it nearly impossible to read a moving target cleanly." He paused as if expecting her to look impressed. "I know," Emily said. "I'm just saying this isn't Reyes." She looked up then, and her voice was quiet, but her eyes were not. "Thank you for the information." Something in her tone ended the conversation. Reyes held her gaze for a moment, then nodded once and walked away, and Emily watched him go, and then returned to the rifle, and the inspection continued exactly where it had left off. Marcus found her 20 minutes later. He didn't approach the way most people approach someone they want to talk to. He approached the way he approached everything, directly, without ceremony, like a man who had decided what he thought and now intended to say it. "Carter." She looked up. "Walk with me." It wasn't a question. Emily capped the objective lens on the scope, set the rifle carefully back in its case, and followed him around the back of the nearest vehicle, where the noise of preparation faded enough for conversation. Marcus stopped and turned. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said, "because in my unit, I don't deal in comfortable lies." "Appreciated," Emily said. "I don't know what Webb told you about this mission, but what I need on that ridge tomorrow is someone who can protect 23 soldiers and a diplomatic convoy against an ambush that may or may not materialize in terrain that has already killed 2 operators in the last 8 months. I need someone who has been in situations where things fell apart and who found a way through anyway." "Okay. So my question is simple. Have you ever been in a situation where everything went wrong at once?" Emily was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone searching for an answer, but the quiet of someone deciding how much of an answer to give. "Ramadi," she said. 2019. 3-man sniper element, myself and 2 partners. Primary and secondary comm both failed. Mission parameters changed mid-execution. We had a 15-minute window to prevent a vehicle-borne IED from reaching a hospital entrance during a civilian evacuation. She paused. "We prevented it." Marcus watched her. "How?" "By doing exactly what we had trained to do, even though none of the conditions matched what we had trained for." I was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What happened to your partners?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Alvarez made it home. Santos didn't." Marcus held that for a second. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. "Yes," Emily said. "So am I." He studied her face. She was not asking for anything from him. She wasn't seeking his approval or his comfort or his understanding. She was just standing there being honest the way she had asked him to be, and something in that steadiness bothered him more than he expected. He had been prepared to dismiss her. He had already constructed a version of this conversation in his mind where he made his concerns clear. She failed to address them convincingly, and he found a way to request a reassignment through Webb that minimized the political friction. He had been confident about that plan right up until she said Santos. "I read your file," he said again. "I know. 12 confirmed long-range engagements, 3 extended reconnaissance deployments, twice decorated for... You read the file, Emily said. You told Lieutenant Colonel Webb that, and you told him what you meant by it. You meant that what's written about a person and who they actually are in the field can be two different things. You were right about that. Marcus blinked. That applies to everyone, she continued, including the assumptions that were already in your head before I walked into that tent. Silence fell between them. Heavy, specific silence. Then Marcus said, "Be at the VS at 0500. He walked away. Emily watched him go, then turned back to finish prepping her equipment. They moved out before sunrise. The route to the observation point required a 6-kilometer approach through broken ground. Not a hike, but a sustained tactical movement through terrain designed by geology to make movement difficult. There were ridgelines that looked traversable from a distance and revealed themselves as treacherous only when you were already committed. There were descents that required both hands and precise foot placement. There were stretches where the ground was unstable enough that each step had to be tested before weight was transferred. Emily had been told indirectly by 3 different soldiers during equipment loadout that this approach was going to be a problem for her. Reyes again. A man named Cho, who barely looked at her when he said it. And a quiet comment from Sergeant First Class Brandt, who had 15 years of mountain experience and seemed genuinely concerned rather than dismissive, but concerned in a way that still assumed she would be the unit's weak link on the terrain. She said nothing to any of them. She simply moved. She had trained in mountain environments for 2 years before her first deployment that required elevated firing positions. She understood how her body behaved at altitude and in heat and under load. She had spent time learning from military mountaineers who operated in ranges where a mistake wasn't a sprained ankle, but a 200-meter fall, and they had taught her things about terrain movement that most soldiers never learned because most soldiers were never required to. The unit moved in staggered formation, and for the first hour and a half, Emily maintained her position without difficulty. She watched the soldiers around her and noticed the small adjustments experienced. Mountain operators make the micro decisions about foot placement and body lean that add up over distance to the difference between arriving exhausted and arriving ready. She made the same adjustments. Around the 90-minute mark, they reached the first major ascent, a steep rocky face that required a scramble using both hands and feet. The man ahead of Emily, Corporal Tate, started the climb and immediately began struggling. He was strong, but his technique was wrong. He was using arm strength to pull himself up, rather than driving from his legs, which burned muscle much faster and created instability on loose rock. Emily climbed steadily behind him. At one point, Tate slipped. His right foot skidded off a foothold, and his weight lurched sideways, and his left hand grabbed for a rock edge that wasn't as solid as it looked. Emily was close enough. She braced against the rock below her and put a hand against his boot, steadying his foot, giving him the half-second he needed to find purchase and recover. He looked down at her. She looked up. "Leg drive," she said quietly. "Let your legs do the work. Your arms are just guides." Tate stared at her for a moment. Then he nodded. He adjusted. He finished the climb without slipping again. At the top, the unit paused to regroup. Marcus was watching. He had been watching from his position during the ascent, and he had seen what happened with Tate, and he said nothing about it. He just looked at Emily for a moment with an expression that was not yet respect, but was no longer the clean dismissiveness of before. It was the specific look of a man who has been certain about something and has just encountered the first piece of evidence that maybe he was wrong. He didn't say anything. He turned and gave the signal to continue. They reached the observation point at 0712. The communications tower was old military infrastructure from a previous conflict, partially disassembled and abandoned, but still structurally sound enough to serve as a frame reference. The position offered a commanding view of the valley and the 2 approach corridors the enemy convoy route was expected to exploit. Emily didn't rest. While the other soldiers set up communication equipment and rotation schedules and began the organizational work of establishing a temporary position, she went immediately to her firing setup. This was the part of the job that most people didn't understand about high-level sniper work. The preparation that happened before the first round was ever chambered. The patient methodical architecture of a shooting position that could sustain precision across hours of environmental change. She chose her position carefully. Not the most obvious one, not the spot that offered the widest view, but also the highest visibility. She chose a position 6 meters back from the ridge lip, which required shooting through a natural gap in the rock formation. The gap restricted her field of view slightly, but it meant she was invisible from any position in the valley below. An enemy observer with optics could scan that ridgeline for hours and never find her. She set up her bipod. She tested the rock stability beneath the bipod feet. She made adjustments until the weapon sat completely without vibration or shift. She took readings with the Kestrel weather meter she carried: wind speed, humidity, temperature, barometric pressure, and began calculating the specific ballistic solutions for the ranges she had already estimated from the terrain maps. 800 meters to the convoy approach route, 1,100 meters to the far ridge, 1,400 meters to the canyon mouth, which was the most likely covered approach for a pre-positioned enemy element. She wrote the numbers in the small field notebook she kept in her front left pocket. Not because she couldn't hold them in her head, but because in a sustained engagement, when adrenaline compressed time and disrupted working memory, she wanted to be able to glance at written numbers rather than reconstruct calculations from scratch. Brandt came and sat beside her after about 40 minutes. Not to check on her. He sat the way soldiers sit when they have decided to pay attention to someone they have reconsidered. "That gap," he said, nodding toward the rock formation through which she had positioned her shooting lane. "Yeah. Restricts your scan by about 40 degrees on the left side." "Yes." Most snipers would want the wider angle. Most snipers haven't been hit because an observer from exactly 40 degrees left identified their position and called it in, Emily said. "I don't need the wide angle. I need to stay alive long enough to be useful." Brandt was quiet for a moment. "Who taught you that?" "Someone who learned it the hard way." He nodded slowly, the kind of nod that means a person has shifted their understanding of a situation and is accepting the shift without argument. "How long can you hold this position?" he asked. Emily looked through the scope. Below the valley was empty and still heat already building in waves that distorted the air over the flat stretches of ground. "As long as necessary," she said. The hours passed. This was the part of Overwatch work that destroyed some snipers, not the danger, not the physical hardship, but the silence. The waiting. The discipline of sustained attention across hours of apparent nothingness, where the mind that had nothing to engage would begin to manufacture distractions, invent patterns that weren't there, drift toward comfort rather than maintenance. Emily had spent years learning to exist inside stillness. She didn't fight the quiet. She inhabited it. She let her breathing settle into the slow rhythm she used in the scope. Not the controlled breathing of tension, but the patient breathing of observation. She moved her scan systematically across the sectors. She had divided the valley into spending 30 to 60 seconds in each sector before moving to the next. Never rushing, never convincing herself a sector was clear, simply because it had been clear the last time she checked it. The soldiers rotated. Men ate, slept, briefly maintained equipment. Emily did not rotate. She ate a protein bar without leaving her position, drank water from the tube she had rigged to her kit, and continued the scan. Marcus came and stood behind her at the 3-hour mark. He watched her for a while without saying anything. Then, "You've been looking at empty rocks all morning." The comment carried the specific tone of a man who was not yet willing to publicly revise his position, who had come close to changing his mind, but was resisting it, using a casual provocation to test whether she would react with defensiveness or frustration. Emily kept her eye on the scope. Empty places are where people hide. Marcus stood there for another 30 seconds. She could feel his presence, the specific weight of his skepticism still intact, but not quite as heavy as it had been at the briefing tent. Then he walked away. She went back to the scan. It was the shadow that she saw first. Not a person, not a weapon. A shadow, the specific absence of light that happens when a solid object is positioned between the sun and a surface, in a way that the geometry of the surroundings shouldn't allow for. She had been scanning the far ridge, which sat at approximately 1,100 meters, when she noticed a line of shadow along the base of a large rock formation that was slightly, almost imperceptibly wrong. She stopped. She went back to it. The shadow was wrong because the sun angle at this time of day should have produced shadow on the opposite side of the formation. Something was creating shadow on the near side, which meant something was on the near side that she couldn't see directly, something solid enough to block light, but positioned in a way designed to be invisible. She slowed her breathing further. She watched the shadow for 4 minutes without moving. On the third minute, a piece of the rock moved. Not the rock itself. Something near the rock, something the color of the rock, but with an edge that caught light slightly differently when it shifted. A ghillie suit. Not a perfect one. Not invisible. Just almost invisible, which was almost enough. Almost. Emily's body remained completely still. Her mind began working. One person in a ghillie suit at that position was a spotter, not a shooter, which meant there was a shooting position nearby that she hadn't identified yet. She began working the geometry backward. Where would you put a shooter if your spotter was at that position? What angle would give you the best coverage of the convoy route 30 meters west? Behind the second rock cluster. She moved her scan incrementally carefully, and within 90 seconds, she found it another shadow anomaly. This one smaller, the specific shape of a barrel, and just barely breaking the profile of the rock in front of it. Sniper pair confirmed. She kept scanning. Because if there was a sniper pair on the far ridge, there wasn't a sniper pair and nothing else. There was a sniper pair and something else. It took her another 11 minutes to map the rest of it. Machine gun team positioned on the near ridge at 840 meters, hidden behind a rock formation that from above looked like part of the natural terrain, but from her angle revealed the specific geometric regularity of a weapon mount. A rocket launcher operator, single man in a rock alcove at roughly 900 meters positioned to engage the lead vehicle of the convoy at the moment it entered the kill zone. And something she almost missed. And the almost missing of it was the thing that sent the coldest feeling through her chest when she finally identified it: an observer. Not a shooter. A controller. A person positioned with a radio at 1,200 meters on the opposite ridge, elevated just enough to have sight lines on the entire valley, including the convoy route and including the observation point where Emily and the unit were positioned. The observer wasn't just directing the attack. The observer was watching for the reaction, which meant they already knew approximately where the overwatch position was. Emily took a slow breath. She had 5 targets across a 1,400-meter range distributed across 3 different elevation zones, with overlapping fields of observation that meant no single engagement sequence was clean. The moment she engaged one target, the others would react. She had a window of perhaps 3 seconds from the first shot before the surviving targets were in motion, and the geometry of the problem changed completely. She understood with complete clarity what was about to be required of her. She pulled herself back from the scope just far enough to look at her notebook. Confirmed her ballistic solutions. Wind had shifted 12 degrees in the last hour. She made the adjustment in her head, confirmed it twice, and locked it. Then she settled back behind the scope. The convoy was 2 minutes out. She could see its dust signature on the approach road, the distant movement of vehicles that didn't yet know what was waiting for them. She reached for her radio. "Hail," she said. Marcus was on the net immediately. "Carter, I have 5 targets. I need you to listen and not talk until I'm done." A pause. Then, "Go ahead." She gave him the positions. All 5. Grid references she had been calculating and recording for the past hour, refined against the terrain features until they were precise enough to be actionable. She spoke quickly, but without rushing the way she had been trained to pass information in situations where time was the constraining variable. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for 3 seconds. "Are you certain?" he said. "Yes." Another pause. "Can you?" He stopped, reconsidered. "What do you need from me?" And that the shift in that question was the first real thing Marcus Hale gave her. Not acknowledgement, not apology, just the right question at the right moment. What do you need from me instead of what are you going to do about it? Keep the unit down and quiet, Emily said. When the shooting starts, nobody moves until I say clear. Understood. She clicked off the radio. Below, the convoy entered the valley. The dust cloud of the vehicles moved into the kill zone. Emily controlled her breathing. She selected her engagement sequence. Machine gun first, it had the highest rate of fire, and therefore the most catastrophic immediate impact if she missed or delayed. Then the launcher before he could acquire and aim. Then the sniper pair rapid succession, because a surviving sniper was the most dangerous thing in this valley to her specifically. Then the observer, because the observer was the intelligence link and needed to be severed. She exhaled halfway. Let the rest of the air leave slowly. The rifle settled into absolute stillness. Her finger found the trigger. And the valley, which had been waiting without knowing it was waiting, was about to discover what it meant to be caught by someone who had been watching long before they expected to be found. The first target moved behind the machine gun. Emily's world narrowed to the intersection of a scope reticle and a single point in space. She had been here before, in Ramadi, in Kandahar, in a training ground in the Virginia mountains at 3 a.m. in driving rain, when her instructor stood behind her and said, "This is the moment. Everything before this was preparation. Everything after this is consequence. The only thing that exists is right now." She fired. The machine gun position went silent, and before the echo finished crossing the valley, her hand was already moving, and the next solution was already locked, and the convoy below kept rolling, and Raven Strike Unit held its breath, and 5 targets became 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, and then the valley was quiet. In a way, it hadn't been quiet all morning. Not the quiet of nothing happening. The quiet of something being finished. Emily stayed in the scope. Her breathing was even. Her hands were steady. The convoy continued its movement through the pass. Below her, 23 soldiers who had expected to fight their way out of an ambush were instead listening to silence and trying to understand how the silence had happened, and slowly beginning to understand who had made it. Marcus Hale's voice came through the radio. "Carter." She waited. "All clear?" she asked. "All clear," he said. His voice was different. Not by much, but by enough. She lowered her face from the scope just slightly and looked at the valley. 5 positions. Silent. The convoy moving safely through the far mouth of the pass. She reached for her notebook and began recording the engagement details with the same careful precision she used for everything else. Wind conditions, time range, engagement sequence, outcome. Sergeant First Class Brandt appeared at her side and crouched down. He looked at the valley. He looked at her notebook. He said nothing for a long time. Then, "How long did you know?" "Been 45 minutes, Emily said. The shadow on the far ridge was the first indicator. Brandt exhaled slowly. 45 minutes, he said again. The observer was the last one I identified. That took the longest. 11 minutes. Brandt sat down on the rock beside her and stared at the valley. 11 minutes to find a hidden observer at 1,200 meters, he said. He had good concealment, Emily said. He almost had excellent concealment. Brandt looked at her sideways. What's the difference between good and excellent? Emily capped the objective lens on her scope. I found him. The valley was quiet, but Emily Carter was not done. She stayed behind the scope for 11 more minutes after the last shot, scanning every sector in sequence, refusing to declare the area clear until she had checked and rechecked every position where a sixth target could have been waiting. This was the part that separated disciplined snipers from reactive ones. The understanding that the moment you assumed the threat was finished was the moment the threat that wasn't finished found you. Only when she was satisfied did she key the radio. All clear, confirmed. Marcus's voice came back immediately. Copy, unit holding position. She began her post-engagement documentation. Wind conditions, timestamps, ranges, engagement sequence. Her handwriting in the field notebook was small and precise, the same. Whether she was writing in a climate-controlled operations center or lying behind a rock at 1,100 feet with dried sweat on her face and her pulse still working its way back down, Brandt was still beside her. He hadn't moved since she finished the last shot. He was watching her write with an expression she recognized, the specific look of someone recalculating everything they thought they understood about a situation. "You're writing it all down," he said. "Right now." "Memory degrades under adrenaline," Emily said without looking up. "Write it while it's accurate. Most guys wait until debrief. Most guys' debrief reports have errors in them." Brandt was quiet for a moment. Then he said very quietly, almost to himself, "Who are you?" Emily capped the pen and looked at him. "Chief Petty Officer Emily Carter," she said. "Overwatch Sniper, Raven Strike Unit, temporarily." She went back to the notebook. Brandt exhaled a long, slow breath that carried about 15 years of assumptions inside it, and didn't say anything else. Marcus came to her position 20 minutes later. He didn't come the way he had come before, the approach of a man asserting authority over a situation he had already decided he understood. He came carefully, which was itself the tell. Marcus Hale was not a careful man. He was a direct man, a confident man, a man who moved through the world as though he had already worked out where he was going. Careful was not in his natural vocabulary. He crouched beside her. For a moment, he just looked at the valley. The convoy had cleared the far side of the pass and was out of sight, safe and intact, carrying whatever it was carrying toward whatever destination mattered to the people who had sent it through a valley that had nearly become its grave. 5, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. It was a man processing a number. 5, Emily confirmed. At those ranges, in that sequence. The sequence mattered more than the ranges, she said. The machine gun had to go first. If I'd started anywhere else, the survivors would have had time to fire before I could cycle. Marcus nodded slowly. He was listening the way he hadn't listened before, not waiting for her to finish so he could respond, but actually taking in what she was saying and fitting it against everything he thought he knew about engagement mechanics. "The observer," he said. 1,200 meters. "Yes, you identified him last." He had the best concealment of the 5. He also had the advantage of not being focused on action. He was watching, not preparing to fire. Inactive targets are harder to find than active ones. Because active targets move. Tiny movements, equipment adjustment, muscle tension, shifting weight. An observer who's been in position for hours and knows what he's doing barely moves at all. She paused. He was good. He just wasn't good enough. Marcus turned and looked at her directly for the first time since she had walked into the briefing tent. "I said something this morning," he started. "You don't have to," Emily said. "Carter. Sergeant Hale." Her voice was even, not cold, but not warm either. "What you said this morning is not what matters right now. What matters is that 23 people are alive because the Overwatch position held. That's the job. That's the whole job." She picked up the field notebook and tucked it into her front pocket. "We can have whatever conversation you feel you need to have when we're back at the FOB." Marcus held her gaze. Something moved across his face. Not quite shame, not quite respect, but something that lived in the neighborhood of both. He stood. "Pack your position. We move in 40. Copy." He walked away, and Emily watched him go, and then she turned back to her rifle and began the systematic process of breaking down the shooting position with exactly the same care she had used to build it. Reyes found her while she was packing. He approached differently than he had the night before when he had come to her with the kind of casual expertise that young men deploy when they want to establish hierarchy without seeming aggressive. That version of Reyes was gone. The version that appeared now was quieter, less certain of where to put his hands. "Those wind conditions," he said. Emily kept working. "You calculated for them before the engagement, before we even got up here." "Yes. How the crosswind in the valley is unpredictable. It changes depending on temperature differential," Emily said, "between the valley floor and the ridge faces. I had the elevation data from the terrain maps and the forecasted temperatures. The drift behavior was estimable within acceptable margins." Reyes was quiet for a moment. "You did that math this morning, before we left." "Last night, actually, before I slept." Another silence. "I was condescending to you," Reyes said. "Yesterday, When you were prepping the rifle. Emily looked up at him. His face was doing the specific work of a 26-year-old who has realized he was wrong about something in a way that has real stakes attached to it. Not embarrassed exactly, but honest in a way that was costing him something. You were trying to be helpful, she said. I was trying to establish that I knew more than you. Yes, Emily said. You were doing both. Reyes exhaled. Can I ask you something? You can ask. When Hale said what he said this morning in the tent, loud enough for everyone to hear, what were you thinking? Right at that moment. Emily considered the question. She had a policy about this kind of question, not because she was unwilling to be honest, but because she had learned that the honest answer often made people feel worse rather than better, and making people feel worse was rarely useful. But Reyes was asking honestly, and honest questions deserved honest answers. I was thinking, she said, that I had been in that exact moment before. Different name, different location, different man. And I was thinking that the only thing that had ever changed any of those moments was not what I said in response to them, but what happened afterward. Reyes thought about that. Does it still bother you? After all these years? Emily picked up the rifle case and straightened. The day it stops bothering me, she said, is the day I stop being a person. It bothers me every time. I've just gotten very good at deciding what to do with that feeling instead of letting it decide for me. She walked past him. He stood there a moment, then fell in behind her, and they moved toward the assembly point together without speaking, and the silence between them was a different kind of silence than the one that had existed between them the day before. The movement back was harder than the movement in. Not because the terrain had changed, but because the unit was carrying the weight of what had happened alongside the weight of their equipment, and those two things together changed how people moved and what they said and how they looked at each other. Marcus set the pace. He moved with his usual efficiency, reading the terrain without seeming to look at it, making decisions about route and timing that came from years of experience in exactly this kind of environment. But he was quieter than usual. Several men noticed it. Brant noticed it, and Brant had been with Marcus for 4 years and could read his silences the way other people read speech. At the halfway rest point, Marcus found a rock and sat and drank water and looked at the middle distance, and Brant sat beside him. You thinking about the briefing tent? Brant said. Marcus took another drink. I'm thinking about the observer, he said. At 1,200 meters, she found him in 11 minutes. She told me. 11 minutes to identify a static target with full concealment at over a kilometer in heat shimmer through a restricted field of view she deliberately chose so she wouldn't be identified herself. Marcus set the water away. You know how many trained snipers could do that? Not many. I can count them on one hand and have fingers left over. He paused. I knew her numbers. I read the file. 12 confirmed engagements, all within established parameters, all professionally executed. Numbers on a page. Numbers on a page aren't the same as watching someone work, Brant said. No. Marcus looked at his hands. They're not. Brant was quiet for a moment. You're going to have to say something to her. She told me I didn't have to. Of course she did. Brant looked at him. That's exactly why you do. Marcus didn't respond, but he didn't disagree. Emily was sitting apart from the main group during the rest, as she usually did during operational pauses. Not because she sought isolation, but because the habits of sniper work included a deep-seated instinct to maintain observation, even when observation wasn't technically required. Old habits didn't switch off cleanly. She was reviewing her field notebook when Corporal Tate sat down nearby. Tate was 24, the youngest in the unit, and he had said almost nothing to Emily since she had arrived. Not dismissively, just the silence of someone who hadn't yet figured out what to think and had chosen to observe before forming an opinion. Emily respected that more than she respected people who formed opinions immediately. The climb, Tate said. When I slipped. Yes. You didn't have to do that. You were falling, Emily said. It was practical. Other people let each other fall sometimes, on purpose, to make a point. Emily looked up from the notebook. About what? Tate shrugged. About who belongs and who doesn't. Who can handle it. That's not a point, Emily said. That's cruelty dressed up as evaluation. Tate nodded slowly. Leg drive, he said. I didn't know that. I've been climbing the wrong way for 2 years. Most people do. The instinct is to use your arms because your arms are at eye level and you can see them working, but your legs are stronger and more stable. Trust what you can't see. Tate looked at her. Is that a sniper thing? Trusting what you can't see? Emily almost smiled. It's the whole job, she said. They made the phobie at 1540. The debriefing happened in sequence Marcus first, with Lieutenant Colonel Webb, then the team leads, then the full unit. Emily went last, which was protocol for the primary engaged element. She sat across from Webb and walked him through the engagement from identification to resolution, without elaboration or self-promotion, the way she had been trained to report facts, sequence outcome. Webb listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at his notes for a moment. 5 targets, he said. Yes, sir. At ranges between 800 and 1400 meters. 840 to 1210, yes, sir. Webb looked up. Chief Petty Officer Carter, he said. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Sir? Did Sergeant Hale's behavior this morning affect your operational capability at any point during the mission? Emily held his gaze. No, sir. Did it affect your judgment? No, sir. Did anything he said or did create conditions that put you or the unit at increased risk? No, sir. She paused. Sergeant Hale is an effective unit commander. He made correct decisions under pressure. Whatever his personal opinions were this morning, they did not compromise his professional execution. Webb watched her for a moment. You're defending him. I'm accurately characterizing what I observed, Emily said. There's a difference. Webb set down his pen. I've been placing female operators in units that weren't ready for them for 9 years, he said. You know what the most common thing is that those operators ask me for afterward? Emily waited. A transfer, he said. Most of them want out within 6 months, not because of capability, because the environment is designed to exhaust them. Yes, sir, Emily said. I know. You're not asking for a transfer. No, sir. Why not? Emily thought about it for a moment. Genuinely thought about it. Not performing consideration, but actually accessing the honest answer. Because they need to see what happens next, she said. The transfer solves my problem. Staying solves theirs. Webb held that for a long moment. Then he said, dismissed. The common area of the phobie that evening had a specific quality to it that Emily had learned to read over the years, the atmosphere of a group of people who have been through something together and are now in the process of deciding what it means. It was different from the easy camaraderie of a normal evening. More deliberate. More charged. She got food, found a corner, and ate without drawing attention to herself. It didn't work. Men kept drifting toward her section of the room. Not in groups individually, one at a time, with the studied casualness of people who want to seem like they're not doing the thing they're clearly doing. They would sit nearby, eat, say something to each other that wasn't aimed at her, and then eventually one of them would say something that was. The first was Cho, who had barely looked at her the day before, when he mentioned he didn't think she could handle the approach. The machine gun position, Cho said. 840 meters. Yes, Emily said. In that wind. The wind was manageable at that range. The longer shots were more challenging. Cho nodded. He ate a few bites. I've seen snipers freeze at 800, he said. Even good ones. When it's real and not a range, and there are other targets and a time constraint. It happens, Emily said. It didn't happen to you. No. Cho looked at his food. I made a comment yesterday about the approach, whether you could handle the terrain. I remember. I want you to know that I understand that comment was Cho. Emily's voice was even, not unkind. You made a professional assessment based on available information. You were wrong, but you were reasoning. That's different from someone who isn't reasoning at all. She paused. I don't hold it against you. Cho was quiet. "That's very generous," he said finally. "It's practical," Emily said. "I need this unit to function. Resentment doesn't help that." He nodded and ate and didn't say anything else. And after a while, he left, and 2 more men came and went over the next hour in variations of the same pattern. The approach, the acknowledgement, the attempt at something that wasn't quite an apology, but was close enough to one that it mattered. Emily accepted each one the same way. Without coldness, without performance, without the kind of magnanimity that announces itself. Just the steady matter-of-fact reception of information about what people thought of her now versus what they had thought of her before. Marcus found her when the common area was mostly empty. It was late enough that the ambient noise of the phobia had settled into its nighttime register generators, distant radio traffic, the low-level operational hum that military installations never completely surrendered to silence. He carried 2 cups of coffee and set one near her without asking if she wanted it. She picked it up. He sat. For a while, neither of them said anything, and the silence was not comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of 2 people who had been in a difficult situation together and were now trying to figure out what that meant going forward. "You said we could have the conversation at the phobia," Marcus said. "I said you could have whatever conversation you felt you needed to have. There's a distinction in there." "Yes." He wrapped both hands around his cup and looked at the table. "I've been in combat for 16 years, he said. I've worked alongside some exceptional operators. I've also worked alongside people who weren't right for a position and got good people hurt. I developed a filtering system, a way of reading new people and making rapid assessments about capability." "That's reasonable," Emily said. "My filtering system failed this morning." "Your filtering system was working from incomplete data." "My filtering system," Marcus said in his voice had a specific edge. Now, not anger, but the harder thing, which was honesty, directed inward, was working from assumptions that predated the data. That's not a system failure. That's a bias masquerading as a system. Emily looked at him. "You've thought about this," she said. "I've been thinking about it since the second shot," he said. "Before you even finished." He paused. "I stood there after the engagement, and I tried to figure out when I had decided you weren't capable. And I couldn't identify a specific moment. It wasn't a decision. It was an assumption that was already in place before you walked through the door." Emily held her coffee cup and didn't speak. "In this unit," Marcus said, "I have a soldier named Reyes, who I put in overwatch position 7 months ago. Even though his long-range numbers were below threshold, because he was aggressive and physical, and fit the profile of what I expected a good operator to look like. He's made errors in 3 missions that we recovered from. Nobody questioned my decision to put him there." He paused again. "I questioned whether you could carry your own equipment up a mountain. The weight of that landed in the air between them." "Why are you telling me this?" Emily said. "Because you told me in the valley that what mattered was not what I said in the tent, but what happened afterward. And I want you to know that what's happening afterward right now is me trying to figure out how to be a better commander than I was this morning." He looked at her. "And that I understand that telling you this doesn't fix anything." Emily was quiet for a long moment. "It doesn't," she agreed. "But it's honest, and honest is the beginning of something." She set the coffee down. "Reyes is better than his numbers suggest, by the way. His instincts are good. His calculation is the issue, not his courage or his vision. He thinks too fast. If you slow him down at the calculation step, his accuracy improves significantly." Marcus stared at her. "How do you know that you've been here less than 48 hours? "I watched him scan during the approach. The way he identifies targets is strong. The way he decides to engage is rushed. He needs a forcing function that puts time back in the equation." She shrugged. "Give him a second-step checklist. Make him run it before he commits. Inside 6 weeks, you'll see the difference." Marcus kept staring. "You're fixing my unit," he said. "While we're having a conversation about how I treated you." "I'm observing what I observed," Emily said. "I can't turn that off." Something crossed Marcus's face that looked finally fully like the thing it was. Respect, clean and unambiguous and earned. "What else did you observe?" he said. And Emily picked up the coffee again, and something in her posture shifted fractionally, not softening exactly, but settling the way a person settles when they decide that the room they're in is worth being in. "Tate has the best instincts in this unit," she said. "He's young, and he doesn't trust them yet. That'll change." "It will," Marcus agreed. "Brant is the person this unit runs on when you're not in the room. Not because of rank, because of consistency. People feel safe when he's nearby. That's rare." Marcus nodded slowly. "And Cho thinks faster than he speaks, which means he usually says the second thing he thought instead of the first. If you want his real assessment on something, give him 20 seconds before he answers instead of 10. Marcus sat back. "You figured all of that out in less than 2 days." "I've been figuring people out my whole life," Emily said. "It's how you survive environments that don't want you there." That sentence sat between them with a weight that neither of them addressed directly. Marcus picked up his coffee. "Carter," he said. "Yes." "I'm glad Webb sent you." Emily looked at him for a moment. "Ask me that again in a week," she said. "When we know if this unit can actually work together or if today was a single good moment in an otherwise ongoing problem." Marcus thought about that. "Fair," he said. "It always is," Emily said. She stood, picked up her tray, and walked out of the common area, and Marcus sat alone with his coffee and the specific feeling of a man who had walked into a day expecting one thing and come out the other side carrying something heavier and more complicated and more important than anything he had brought in with him. 3 hours later, at 2200. Emily was awake. Not because she couldn't sleep, she could sleep almost anywhere, a skill acquired through years of operational tempo that turned rest into a tactical resource rather than a comfort, but because something from the debrief was still sitting wrong in her mind. She went over it again. The observer. The one who had taken 11 minutes to find. The one with the best concealment. The one positioned to watch the observation point rather than just the convoy. He had known approximately where the overwatch was. Not precisely. If he had known precisely, he would have directed the sniper pair to engage the position directly, but approximately. Close enough to be watching the right ridgeline, which meant someone had told him, not the exact position Emily had chosen that herself, only after they arrived, and she had chosen it specifically to avoid the obvious locations. But the general area, the ridgeline, the observation tower. She sat with that for a while. Then she got up, went to her kit, and found her field notebook. She turned to the page where she had recorded the engagement data and read through it again, looking for the detail she might have noted without understanding its significance. She found it in the third line. The observer had been positioned not randomly, not opportunistically, at a specific elevation that gave him sight lines on exactly two things: the convoy route and the ridgeline containing the communications tower. I wasn't there to watch the convoy succeed or fail. He was there to watch the response. Which meant the ambush was not only an ambush, it was a test. Someone wanted to know how Raven Strike Unit would respond to contact in this valley. Someone wanted to know their reaction times, their positions, their communication patterns. Someone inside the intelligence chain had told the enemy where to look. Emily closed the notebook. She sat in the dark for a long time, turning that understanding over in her mind, feeling its edges, looking for the place where she was wrong. She couldn't find one. She got up, pulled on her jacket, and went to find Marcus Hale. Because the mission that had ended in the valley this afternoon was not the mission she thought it was. And the danger that she had thought was finished was not finished at all. It had just changed its shape. Marcus Hale was not a man who startled easily. 16 years of combat had burned the startle reflex out of him, the way fire burns moisture out of wood, slowly, completely, until what remained was something denser and less reactive than what it had been before. He had been woken at 3 in the morning by incoming mortar fire, by radio alerts, by the specific silence that follows an explosion and means another one is coming. He had learned to move from sleep to full operational awareness in under 4 seconds without the adrenaline spike that would impair his judgment. But when Emily knocked on his door at 2200 and he opened it and saw her face, something in his chest tightened. Not because of what she said. Because of what she hadn't said yet. And because the expression on her face was the expression of someone who has been sitting with a very bad thought for a long time and has run out of reasons to believe the thought is wrong. "Come in," he said. She came in. She didn't sit. She stood in the center of the small room with her field notebook in her hand and looked at him the way she had looked through the scope that morning, focused, unhurried, absolutely certain of what she was seeing. "The observer," she said. "The one at 1,200 meters." Yes. He was watching the ridgeline, not just the convoy route. The ridgeline, specifically the one with the communications tower. Marcus was quiet. "I noticed his position in my notes, but I didn't process the significance until an hour ago," she said. "His elevation gave him sightlines on exactly two things: the convoy approach and our observation point. Not adjacent terrain, not escape routes. Those two specific things." "He knew we were there," Marcus said. "He knew approximately where we were. Not precisely, if precisely he would have directed the sniper pair to engage our position first. But he knew the right ridgeline. He knew to look at the tower area." Marcus sat down on the edge of his cot. "That's not—" He stopped, reconsidered. "That's not something they could have predicted from the terrain. We didn't confirm the overwatch position until we were already moving. Webb and I discussed two possible locations. Who else was in that conversation?" The question landed like a stone into still water, and the ripples it made were immediate and visible on Marcus's face. He thought about it. He was careful about it. She could see him being careful, resisting the instinct to immediately name the people who had been present, and instead thinking about whether naming them was accurate. "The full planning session," he said slowly. "Webb, myself, Brandt, the two team leads. And the intelligence liaison." "Which intelligence liaison?" "Captain Doyle. Attached from the regional intelligence cell 4 weeks ago." Emily wrote the name in the notebook. "What do you know about him?" "Standard attachment. Previous deployments in this theater. His intelligence product has been accurate threat assessments, convoy timing, enemy disposition." Marcus paused. "Accurate enough that we've been relying on it heavily." "Accurate intelligence from a compromised source is still possible," Emily said. "If someone wants to build your trust before they use it." Marcus stood up. The implication was not subtle, and Marcus was not a man who needed things explained to him slowly. He had worked in environments where trust was both the most critical resource and the most easily weaponized, and he understood exactly what Emily was describing. "You're telling me we have a leak," he said. "I'm telling you the evidence is consistent with a leak. I don't have confirmation." "What would a confirmation look like?" Emily looked at him steadily. "Another mission," she said. "Same pattern. An enemy element that knows more than they should about where we are and how we'll respond. If the observer was there to gather information rather than just support the ambush, then someone somewhere is receiving that information and using it to prepare the next contact." Marcus was very still. "When is the next convoy movement?" he said. "That's what I came to ask you." The answer was 72 hours. Another diplomatic convoy, different route, same general theater of operations. The planning session had been completed 2 days ago. The intelligence product. Doyle's product had shaped the route selection, the timing windows, the overwatch positioning recommendations. Marcus told her all of this, standing in his quarters at 22:30, with the generator hum outside the wall, and both of them working through the same calculation simultaneously. If the route selection was shaped by compromised intelligence, Emily said, then the route is already known. Which means the ambush is already being planned. Which means we have 72 hours to figure out which part of the planning chain is compromised before 23 more people drive into a prepared kill zone. Marcus ran a hand across the back of his neck. "I need to take this to Webb." "Yes," Emily said. "But carefully. If the compromise is at the planning level, Webb's immediate response, a full security review, pulling Doyle, changing the route, will tell whoever is watching that the leak has been identified. They'll go quiet. We'll lose the thread." "So you're saying we don't tell Webb?" "I'm saying we tell Webb exactly what I told you. And then we let Webb decide how far to run it, and we watch who reacts to the fact that we're looking. Marcus stared at her. That's a surveillance operation. It's observation, Emily said. Which is what I do. A long silence. Then Marcus said, You came here tonight instead of going directly to Webb. Yes. Why? Emily held his gaze. Because I needed to know if you were going to hear this or dismiss it, she said. If you'd dismissed it, I would have gone to Webb anyway. But I needed to know where you stood before this got complicated. Marcus held that for a moment. And if I'd dismissed it, then I'd have gone to Webb and noted in my report that the unit commander was informed and chose not to act. It was not a threat. It was a fact stated with the same neutrality she used for all facts, and Marcus received it the same way without defensiveness, because it was accurate, and he knew it was accurate, and pretending otherwise would have made the situation worse. I'm not dismissing it, he said. No, Emily said. You're not. She picked up her notebook. Get Webb now, she said. Late is better than tomorrow. Whoever is feeding information is watching the clock the same way we are. Webb took 12 minutes to go from asleep to fully functional, which was faster than most men half his age. He sat across from Marcus and Emily in the operations room with a cup of cold coffee and listened to everything without interrupting. When Emily finished, he looked at the field notebook she had set on the table between them. The observer's position, he said. I can show you on the terrain map, Emily said. He looked at the map. She indicated the position, the elevation, the specific sightlines it created. Webb studied it for a while, then leaned back. You're right that this isn't random positioning, he said. An ambush support element positioned there at that elevation makes no tactical sense unless you're also interested in gathering intelligence about the response. Yes, sir. And you think the source of the position leak is in our planning cell. The information had to come from somewhere. The Overwatch location wasn't public. It was discussed in a session that included 5 people plus the intelligence liaison. Webb looked at Marcus. Doyle, Marcus said. I know what you're both thinking, Webb said. And I need you to understand that before I take any action that implicates a captain who has been attached to this unit for 4 weeks, I need more than a positional inference from one engagement. Understood, sir, Emily said. What I can do is structure the next planning session to test the hypothesis, Webb said. He was quiet for a moment, working something out. 2 separate planning cells, each with different route information, different timing windows. One cell includes Doyle, the other doesn't. If the ambush element on the next mission positions consistent with the route only Doyle's cell knew about, then the leak is confirmed, Marcus said. And if they position consistent with the other route, then either the leak is somewhere else in the chain or there's no leak, and the positioning today was genuinely coincidental, Emily said. She paused. I don't believe it was coincidental. Neither do I, Webb said. But belief isn't evidence. He picked up the cold coffee, looked at it, set it back down. Carter, he said. Sir, you identified a sniper pair, a machine gun team, a launcher operator, and a hidden observer across a 1,400-meter range in 45 minutes, in conditions that would have degraded most operators' effectiveness significantly, and you did it while maintaining a shooting position invisible from the valley floor. He paused. And now you've identified a potential intelligence compromise from a single positional data point in a field notebook entry that most people wouldn't have cross-referenced. Emily waited. What else have you noticed since you got here that you haven't told anyone yet? The question was precise, and Webb knew it was precise. He was not asking casually. He was asking the way commanding officers ask when they have realized they have been operating with less information than they needed and are correcting that deficit urgently. Emily was quiet for a moment. Doyle's intelligence product on the last 3 missions has been accurate in ways that are statistically unusual, she said. Enemy disposition timing equipment. He's been right at a rate that exceeds what you'd expect from signal intelligence and human source reporting alone. You've been reviewing past mission intelligence products, Marcus said. I read everything in the shared operations folder when I arrived, Emily said. It's standard for Overwatch integration. Nobody reads all of that, Marcus said. I do. Webb looked at her. How unusual, he said. Over 12 missions, his positional accuracy on enemy elements has been within acceptable parameters 10 times. 2 outliers, both high-risk operations, where his accuracy was near perfect. Not good. Near perfect. She opened the notebook to page she had prepared before coming to Marcus's room. Mission 7. He placed an enemy command element within 40 meters. Mission 11. He identified a vehicle-borne threat that all other intelligence sources had missed entirely. Those were successful missions, Marcus said. We relied on that intelligence. Yes, Emily said, because it was accurate. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Webb said, "You're describing someone who is receiving information from the enemy as well as providing it to them." Accurate intelligence flowing in both directions, Emily said. He gets good product from them. They get positioning from him. Both sides benefit from the relationship. That's not a leak, Marcus said. His voice had changed, lower and harder. That's active collaboration. Yes, Emily said. That's what I think it is. Webb made a decision in the next 10 minutes that Emily would later describe to a JAG investigator as the most tactically sound command response she had witnessed in her career. He did not pull Doyle. He did not alert the broader security apparatus. He did not change the mission parameters in any way that would signal awareness. He separated the planning cells, exactly as he had described, using a cover story about operational security protocols that would not seem unusual, given the unit's recent deployment tempo. He put Doyle in Cell 1 with route information that had been subtly modified. The timing windows were real, but one key waypoint was shifted 4 kilometers east. If an enemy element pre-positioned near that shifted waypoint on the next mission, the case was made. He also authorized Emily to conduct informal observation of Doyle's behavior and communications patterns over the next 48 hours, using her operational cover as overwatch integration to justify proximity to planning activities. You understand this is not official surveillance, Webb said. You are not a counterintelligence officer. You have no authority to detain, confront, or formally document anything you observe. You bring what you see directly to me. Understood, sir. And you do not tell anyone else what you're doing. Not Brandt, not Reyes, nobody. He looked at Marcus when he said that last part. Marcus held his gaze. I'll need to know what she finds, Marcus said. You'll know when I know, Webb said. Until then, you run the unit exactly as you have been. Nothing changes. Marcus nodded. It cost him something to nod. Emily could see that. He was a man who ran his unit on complete situational awareness and being told to operate without full information. In his own command space went against everything his instincts demanded. But he understood the operational logic, and he overrode the instinct, and he nodded. That was its own kind of discipline. Doyle worked out of a small office adjacent to the operations room, which shared a wall with the communications section. Emily spent the first 12 hours observing from a distance, building a baseline. She noted his patterns when he ate, when he used the secure terminal, when he went outside, who he spoke to, and for how long. She was not trying to catch him doing something wrong. She was trying to understand what normal looked like for him, so that deviation from normal would be visible. What she found initially was unremarkable. Doyle was 34, methodical, professional seeming. He arrived at his desk early and stayed late. He communicated primarily through the secure terminal. He ate alone and quickly as though meals were interruptions rather than breaks. He didn't socialize with the unit in the way that attached officers sometimes did, the performative integration of someone trying to build rapport. He was friendly when spoken to and reserved when not, and there was nothing about his surface behavior that would have triggered concern. But Emily was not looking at surface behavior. She was looking at the spaces between the surface behaviors. On the second morning she saw it. Not dramatic, not obvious. The kind of thing you would never notice unless you had already been watching for 48 hours and had built a precise enough baseline that deviations from it registered as clearly as a shadow on a ridgeline. Doyle used the secure terminal in 2 distinct patterns. The first was his regular intelligence product work. Longer sessions, multiple database queries, report generation. The second was something else, shorter sessions, single query, immediate logout. These shorter sessions happened approximately once every 6 to 8 hours, irregularly timed, which meant they were not a scheduled routine, but a responsive behavior. Someone was triggering them. She timed them. She noted the duration. Then she went to the one person in the phobia who could help her understand what those sessions looked like from the outside, without tipping anything to Doyle. Sergeant Chen ran the communications section. He had been with the unit for 3 years, predated Doyle's attachment by 32 months, and had the specific personality type of someone who understood everything that passed through his equipment and said very little about it. Emily had identified him on the first day as someone worth knowing. She approached him during his lunch break. "I have a technical question," she said. "Off the record." Chen looked at her over his sandwich. "Overwatch snipers don't usually have technical questions about communications. This one does." He put the sandwich down. "What kind of question?" "If someone were using the secure terminal to send short-duration transmissions on an irregular schedule," Emily said carefully, "what would those transmissions look like on your end? In terms of traffic signature?" Chen was quiet for a moment. His face didn't change, but his stillness changed, became more deliberate. "Are you asking me if I've noticed something?" he said. "I'm asking a technical question." He looked at her for a long moment. "Short-duration transmissions on an irregular schedule," he said slowly, "would look different from standard intelligence reporting traffic. Different packet size, different query pattern. If someone were looking at the traffic logs, they would stand out." "Has anyone been looking at the traffic logs?" "I look at the traffic logs every day," Chen said. "That's my job." "And have you noticed anything?" Another long pause. "I noticed something 3 weeks ago," Chen said. "I didn't know what to do with it because the traffic was authenticated, it had proper credentials. So technically, it wasn't anomalous from a security standpoint. But from a pattern standpoint. From a pattern standpoint, it didn't fit any operational requirement I could identify." Emily held his gaze. "I need you to tell Colonel Webb exactly what you just told me," she said. "Today." Chen looked at his sandwich. "I should have told him 3 weeks ago," he said. "Yes," Emily said. "You should have. But today is what we have." Webb met with Chen that afternoon. Emily was not in the room. She had given Webb the information and stepped back from it, which was the correct move. She had no counterintelligence authority, and inserting herself further into the investigation would compromise the chain of evidence. What she could do was prepare for what came next, because what came next was the confrontation of a mission in 72 hours with a potentially compromised intelligence officer still in the planning cell, and the question of how you run a protection operation when the threat is not outside the wire but inside it. She went back to her notebook. She thought about the convoy route, the real one, and the modified one that Cell 1 had been given. She thought about the geography of the valley system, the approach corridors, the elevated positions that an enemy element would need to pre-position in if they were acting on Doyle's information. She mapped it, not on paper in her head, the way she mapped everything, building a three-dimensional model of the terrain from the data she had available, and rotating it, looking at it from different angles, identifying the positions that made tactical sense, and the ones that only made sense if you already knew where the convoy was going to be. There were 3 positions consistent with the modified waypoint. She wrote the grid references in the notebook. If an enemy element appeared at any of those positions in the next 72 hours, it would not be coincidence. And if they appeared at those positions, the mission was not about protecting a convoy anymore. It was about closing a trap that had been built on the bones of an operation the enemy thought they controlled. Marcus found her at the firing range at 1700 running slow-fire drills. She had been at it for 2 hours, not because she needed the practice, but because the physical rhythm of the work settled her thinking in a way that sitting still did not. He waited until she finished the magazine. "Webb briefed me," Marcus said. "Good. Chen's traffic logs go back to week 2 of Doyle's attachment. The pattern's there from the beginning." Emily ejected the magazine and set it aside. "From the beginning," she said. "Not building a relationship first. He came in already running." "Which means this wasn't opportunistic," Marcus said. He was placed here. The weight of that settled between them. He's not a leak, Marcus said quietly. He's an asset. Someone else's asset embedded in our intelligence cell. Yes. How long has this been going on at other units? How many other FOBs has he been through? That's a question for counterintelligence, Emily said. Way above what I can determine from a field notebook and 48 hours of observation. Webb is contacting them now, Marcus said. Secure channel direct to the theater CI cell. He paused. They want to let the mission run. Emily looked at him. Let the mission run, she said. Controlled operation. We run the convoy with the modified route. If Doyle's information reaches the enemy and they pre-position on the modified waypoint, we have confirmation and we have them in a prepared interdiction. Full air and ground assets. No ambush a trap. Emily was quiet. And if something goes wrong, she said. If the timing is off, or Doyle has access to more information than we gave Cell 1, then 23 people are in a compromised convoy again, Marcus said. He said it flatly without flinching. I know. Webb accepted that risk. Webb didn't accept it unilaterally. Theater CI signed off. They've been looking for this cell for 8 months. This is the first time they've had a thread they can actually pull. He looked at her. They want you on Overwatch. Emily didn't respond immediately. She picked up the empty magazine and began reloading it, a deliberate, methodical action that her hands could do without conscious thought, which freed her mind to work. The operation they were describing was not an Overwatch mission. It was a counterintelligence operation, using a convoy as bait with an enemy ambush element that would be larger and better prepared than the one she had engaged in the valley, because this time the enemy would believe they had complete information and would commit fully. More targets, better positioned, expecting success. And somewhere in the middle of all of it was a man named Doyle, who was sitting in an office 30 meters from where she was standing, sending short-duration transmissions on an irregular schedule, and had no idea that the woman who had arrived 48 hours ago, and whom everyone had dismissed as a problem to be managed, had read every piece of intelligence he had ever produced, tracked his pattern to the minute, and walked it directly to his commanding officer. What's the Overwatch position? She said. Marcus told her. She thought about it. Longer range than the valley. More complex wind environment. Potentially multiple engagement axes, depending on where the enemy element chose to pre-position relative to the modified waypoint. I'll need 4 hours of setup time, she said. You'll have 6. She finished reloading the magazine. What about Doyle? She said. During the mission. Does he know the real route? No, Cell 1 has the modified route. Cell 2, the real route, is a 5-person compartment. Webb, me, Brandt, Theater, CI, Liaison, and you. And Doyle continues to operate normally. Until the mission is complete and Theater CI has enough to act, Marcus said. Yes. Emily slid the magazine into the rifle. He's going to be in the operations room during the mission, she said. Monitoring. Yes. Watching the traffic, potentially trying to provide real-time updates if something doesn't match what he told them. Marcus was quiet. Is that a problem for the operation? He said. It's a risk, Emily said. If he realizes the convoy isn't on the route he provided, he may try to warn them. Through the terminal or another method we haven't identified. Chen is monitoring the terminal in real time, Marcus said. The moment Doyle makes a non-standard transmission, Chen pulls it, Emily said, and Webb detains Doyle on the spot. She looked at the rifle. It's a tight operation, she said. Yes. A lot of things have to go right simultaneously. Yes. She looked at Marcus. Has Webb considered that Doyle might have a secondary communication method, something that doesn't go through the terminal? Marcus's expression shifted. Chen's logs only cover secure terminal traffic, Emily said. If Doyle has a personal device, a dead drop a physical signal system, then Chen can't intercept it. Then the enemy gets a warning we can't control, Emily said. And the prepared position we're counting on becomes something else, something we haven't planned for. The silence that followed was the specific silence of people who have just identified a hole in a plan that they do not have time to close completely. Marcus said, "What do we do about it?" Emily looked at the rifle for a long moment. "We make sure that whatever warning Doyle manages to send," she said, "arrives too late to change anything." "How?" She picked up the rifle and set it on the rack. "By not giving him anything to observe until the last possible moment," she said. "The convoy moves on a compressed timeline. Doyle doesn't know the mission has launched until it's already in the target area. By the time he identifies the discrepancy and attempts to communicate it, the window for the enemy to reposition has already closed." Marcus thought about it. "Compressed timeline means the convoy approaches are rushed," he said. "Higher risk of mechanical issues, slower reaction time if something unexpected." "Yes," Emily said. "Everything has a cost." She looked at him. "What's the alternative?" Marcus ran the calculation. "I'll talk to Webb," he said. "Tonight." "Good." She picked up her kit. "And Marcus." He looked at her. "Make sure Chen does a physical inspection of Doyle's workspace before 0500 tomorrow," she said. "Anything he can justify as routine equipment check. I want to know if there's anything in that office that shouldn't be there." Marcus held her gaze for a moment. "You've been thinking about this longer than tonight," he said. "Since the valley," Emily said. "Since the moment I found the shadow that was in the wrong place." She held his gaze. "That's what I do, Hale. I find the things that are in the wrong place." She walked off the range. Marcus stood there in the late afternoon heat and watched her go, and felt for the second time in 3 days the specific humbling sensation of realizing that the most dangerous person in his unit had arrived in a package he had almost refused to open. He picked up his radio and called Webb. Because 72 hours from now, a convoy was going to drive into a valley where an enemy believed they had every advantage, and the woman who had already taken that particular belief apart once was about to do it again. Only this time, she wasn't just protecting a convoy. She was closing a trap that had been months in the building around a man who had never considered the possibility that someone had been watching him as carefully as he had been watching everyone else. Chen found it at 0347. Not on the secure terminal, not in the communications logs, not anywhere that a standard equipment check would have looked, which was precisely why it had been there for 4 weeks without anyone finding it. It was a commercial satellite communicator, the kind used by wilderness expeditions and offshore sailors, small enough to fit in a jacket pocket, encrypted with civilian-grade software that had been modified in ways that suggested someone with significant technical capability had worked on it. It was taped to the underside of Doyle's desk drawer, which meant it required removing the drawer completely, to find which meant a casual inspection would never have reached it. Chen pulled the drawer. He saw it. He photographed it in place, then contacted Webb through a secure channel that did not go through the operations room, where Doyle was sleeping 40 meters away. Webb called Marcus at 0351. Marcus called Emily at 0353. She was already awake. "Secondary device," Marcus said when she answered. "Satellite communicator," Emily said. It wasn't a question. A pause on Marcus's end. "How did you—" "It's the obvious choice," she said. "Compact encrypted, no internal network footprint. Did Chen find it or photograph it?" "Both." "Good. Leave it where it is." Another pause. Longer. "Carter, if we leave it in place." "If we remove it, Doyle knows we found it the moment he reaches for it," Emily said. "If we leave it, he uses it, and we know exactly what he sends, and when he sends it, because Chen can monitor the satellite frequency once he has the device identifier from the photograph." She could hear Marcus processing that. "Webb needs to hear this," he said. "I know. I'll be at the operations room in 4 minutes." She was there in 3. Webb looked at the photograph on Chen's tablet and said nothing for a full 30 seconds. The 4 of them stood in the operations room. Webb, Marcus, Chen, and Emily, in the specific quiet of 0400 when the phobie was at its lowest operational tempo and the likelihood of an unintended audience was minimal. "He's been running this the whole time," Webb said. It wasn't directed at anyone. He was processing aloud the way commanders process when the size of what they're looking at exceeds their immediate capacity to compartmentalize it. Every mission product, every route assessment, every threat evaluation. He's been cross-referencing it against whatever they've been feeding him and packaging it back out, which is why his accuracy rate was so high, Emily said. He wasn't generating intelligence. He was laundering it, taking their information, repackaging it as his own product, running it through our systems so it had our authentication on it. And the missions where he was near perfect, Marcus said slowly. Mission 7 and 11. Those were probably operations they wanted us to succeed at, Emily said. Building confidence, making sure we kept trusting his product. She looked at Webb. They were setting the table for something larger. This convoy, Webb said. This convoy, Emily confirmed. Or something after it. This might be the first real move, not the final one. Webb set the tablet down. Recommendations, he said. All of you, now. Chin spoke first. I can access the satellite frequency with the device identifier from the photograph. I can't decrypt the content in real time. The civilian encryption is modified enough that it'll take the technical cell time to crack, but I can tell you when transmissions occur, duration and signal strength. That tells us when he's communicating and roughly how much he's sending. Do it, Webb said. Starting now. What else? The mission timeline, Emily said. We discussed compressing it last night. That becomes more critical now. If Doyle has a secondary device that we can't fully intercept in real time, our control over what information reaches the enemy depends entirely on timing. The convoy has to be in the target area before he has enough information to send anything useful. How compressed? Marcus said. Launch 6 hours earlier than planned. He won't know the convoy has moved until it's already past the point where repositioning is possible for an enemy element waiting at the modified waypoint. Webb looked at Marcus. Logistics, Marcus said. He was calculating. 6 hours earlier is 0400 instead of 1000. Pre-mission checks equipment load vehicle inspection. We'd be doing all of it in darkness. Yes, Emily said. That increases ground-level error probability. It decreases the window for Doyle to communicate effectively, Emily said. You decide which risk is larger. Marcus looked at Webb. Your call, sir, Marcus said. Webb didn't hesitate. We launch at 0400, he said. Tell the convoy commander it's a timing adjustment based on new threat assessment. Nobody mentions the real reason. He looked at each of them in turn. Doyle stays in his bunk until 0600. By then the convoy is already in the target area. He picked up the tablet again. Chen, I need someone physically monitoring Doyle's quarters starting now. Someone he'd expect to see moving around at this hour. Not surveillance, just presence. Brandt, Marcus said immediately. He runs early PT. It won't look wrong. Get Brandt. Don't tell him why. Webb looked at Emily. You have 6 hours to reach the overwatch position before the convoy enters the target area. What do you need? Emily had been ready for this question since the moment Marcus called her 40 minutes ago. Transport to the base of the ridgeline. Solo movement from there. Radio on the command net with a direct channel to you and Marcus. And I need the real grid references for all 3 pre-positioned interdiction teams, not the modified route, the actual positions. If the enemy elements show up where I think they will, I want to know exactly where our people are before I start sending rounds downrange. Done, Webb said. Anything else? Yes, Emily said. When this is over and Theater CI moves on Doyle, I want to be in the debrief, not as a witness, as a technical consultant on what his intelligence product actually did to mission parameters across the last 12 weeks. Webb looked at her for a moment. That's not a standard request, he said. No, sir, Emily said. It's not. Another moment. Agreed, Webb said. Now move. The transport dropped her at the ridgeline base at 0423. She moved alone through the darkness with a comfort that came not from recklessness, but from years of learning how to navigate by touch and memory and the specific spatial awareness that develops in people who have spent enough time in the dark that it stops being the absence of light and becomes a different kind of information. The overwatch position Webb had selected was a natural rock formation at 1,600 meters elevation, offering a commanding view of the valley system, including all 3 pre-identified enemy pre-position sites. It was farther than the valley position from Part 1. The wind environment was more complex. The elevation change between the position and the target areas created ballistic correction requirements that added a layer of calculation to every shot. She had done the math before she left the phobby. She built the position in 90 minutes, slower than her standard because she was working alone in darkness faster than most operators could manage under daylight conditions with a partner. She ran through every check twice, then settled behind the scope and began the slow process of acclimating her eyes and her attention to the environment. At 0621, the first light came up over the eastern ridge. 80634, she picked up movement at pre-position Site 1. Not the convoy, not friendly elements. An enemy force establishing a position on the ridgeline above the 4th Valley waypoint, the modified one, the one that only Cell 1 had received, the one that Doyle had passed along. She keyed the radio. Hail, contact at Site 1. Count is 4, possibly 5. They're setting up, not waiting. Estimate 15 minutes to full position establishment. Marcus's voice came back immediately. Copy. Theater CI is moving. What's their equipment? Emily watched through the scope. Heavy. Machine gun platform, same type as the Valley. At least one launcher. I can't confirm the count on small arms from this range. I need another 2 minutes. Take your time. Convoy is holding at the phase line. She continued scanning Site 1, while simultaneously running the sector check on Sites 2 and 3 that she had been maintaining since her scope acclimated. Site 2 was empty. Site 3 showed nothing. Then it showed something. It was subtle. A disturbance pattern in the loose surface material at the base of a rock formation at Site 3. The kind of pattern that happens when a person has recently moved through an area and the ground record of their movement hasn't fully settled. Recent. Within the last hour, maybe less. She adjusted her scan, found a ghillie suit, then another. Hail. 2-person element at Site 3, sniper pair. Already in position, they've been there since before first light. A pause. Before first light, Marcus said. Yes. Which means they were in position before the convoy timeline was compressed. Emily understood immediately what he was saying. If the enemy had pre-positioned a sniper pair at Site 3 before the original 1000 launch time had even passed, they had done it based on information older than Doyle's transmission last night. They've had this valley flagged for weeks, she said. Site 3 is the natural overwatch counterposition. Anyone who knew we were going to run a convoy through this valley system would have pre-positioned a counter-sniper element eventually. Or someone gave them a longer advance warning than we thought, Marcus said. Both things can be true, Emily said. She kept her scan moving. Site 1, Site 3, back to 2. The pattern she was building was becoming clearer. A prepared killing field, designed by someone who understood how Overwatch operations worked and had planned specifically to neutralize the Overwatch element before the ambush proper began. The sniper pair at Site 3 wasn't there to support the ambush. They were there for her, or for whoever was in the Overwatch position. She felt that specific cold clarity settle into her chest. Not fear, but the recognition of danger that is honest with itself. Someone on the enemy side had planned for a sniper, had planned to counter a sniper, had known that a capable Overwatch element was the one variable that could unravel an otherwise well-prepared ambush. She keyed the radio. Marcus, the pair at Site 3 is a counter-sniper element. They're not supporting the ambush. They're hunting the Overwatch. A short silence. Can they see your position? Emily ran the geometry. Her position was on the western ridgeline. Site 3 was on the eastern face of a parallel ridge. The sight line between the two positions crossed approximately 1,400 meters of open air, and the geometry of her hide chosen specifically for its invisibility from the valley floor had not been calculated against a counter-sniper element positioned on the opposing ridgeline at equivalent elevation. She checked the gap in the rock formation through which she had built her firing lane. From Site 3, her position was not invisible. It was partially visible. The gap in the rock that concealed her from below created a specific profile from the opposing ridgeline, a rectangular darkness in the rock face that a trained observer would recognize as a constructed hide. They knew roughly where she was. They were waiting for her to shoot. The moment she engaged Site 1, the muzzle signature would confirm her exact position, and the pair at Site 3 would have a firing solution. She had perhaps 3 seconds between her first shot and their response. "I have a geometry problem," she said into the radio. "Tell me," Marcus said. "Counter-sniper at Site 3 has a partial sightline on my position through the gap in my hide. If I engage Site 1 first, my muzzle signature will confirm my position to the pair before I can cycle and engage them." "What's the range to Site 3 from your position?" 1420 meters. "Can you engage Site 3 first?" "The moment I fire on Site 3, Site 1 begins their engagement. The convoy is still at the phase line, they're safe, but our interdiction teams are in position and exposed." "So either way, something takes fire the moment you shoot," Marcus said. "Yes. How long do you need?" "To do what?" "To figure out how to solve this." Emily was already solving it. Had been solving it since the moment she identified the geometry problem, because that was what her mind did. Under pressure, it didn't stop, it didn't spiral, it narrowed to the specific constraints of the problem and began working the variables with the same methodical patience she used for everything else. Site 3 was 1420 meters. The pair was established, they weren't moving. The wind at this elevation and range would pull the round approximately 11 inches to the right at current conditions. She would need to hold left by that margin. If she engaged Site 3 first, the pair went down before they could respond to her muzzle signature. But Site 1, 1,500 meters to the north, began their operation. The moment shooting starts anywhere in the valley. The convoy is still back. The interdiction teams take fire. Unless the interdiction teams weren't waiting for her to shoot first. "Marcus," she said. "The interdiction teams. Can they initiate on my mark without waiting for enemy fire?" "Theater CI has authority for that," Marcus said. "What are you thinking?" "Simultaneous initiation. I give a mark. Interdiction teams engage Site 1 at the same moment I engage Site 3. Site 1 takes ground fire before they can open up on the interdiction teams. Site 3 goes down before they can respond to my muzzle flash. The ambush collapses at both ends simultaneously." A pause. "That requires coordination across 3 elements in real time," Marcus said. "Yes, and it requires the interdiction teams to initiate before they take fire, which is a different rules of engagement scenario than we briefed." "Yes. Carter, if the timing is off by more than—" "I know what happens if the timing is off," Emily said. Her voice was even. "I also know what happens if we do nothing and the convoy enters this valley with an intact counter-sniper element and a prepared ambush at Site 1. She paused. "Make the call, Marcus." The silence on the radio lasted 4 seconds. In operational time, 4 seconds is a very long pause. "I need Webb," Marcus said. 30 seconds. "You have 30 seconds," Emily said. "After that, the Site 1 element will be fully established and the window for ground interdiction closes." She kept her scope on Site 3. The ghillie suits were still. One of the 2 snipers had shifted position slightly, settling in, adjusting for the long wait. The other was completely motionless in a way that suggested high training. 20 seconds. She ran the ballistic solution for Site 3 again. Wind drift, 11 inches right. Elevation correction, -4 minutes of angle for the 1,400-meter range. The target was partially concealed by the ghillie suit and the rock formation. She could see the visible portion of the outline, but not a clean center mass shot. She would aim for the edge of the rifle, hit the weapon system and the shooter simultaneously. It was a harder shot than anything in the valley. She had made harder shots. 15 seconds. Marcus came back on the radio. "Webb approves simultaneous initiation. You have command authority on the mark. Interdiction teams are standing by on this frequency." Emily exhaled. "Copy," she said. "Interdiction teams, this is Carter. On my mark, you initiate against Site 1. Acknowledge." 2 voices came back clean and immediate. Team 1 acknowledged. Team 2 acknowledged. She settled behind the scope. The ballistic solution was locked. She put the reticle exactly where she needed it. 3, she said. She controlled her breath. 2. She felt the trigger under her finger, 2 pounds 4 ounces of pressure standing between the current moment and the next one. 1. She fired. The rifle moved. She cycled. She was already shifting to the secondary target in Site 3, not because the first shot had missed. She knew it hadn't, but because in a simultaneous engagement, you didn't wait to confirm before cycling, you trusted the solution and moved. From Site 1, the sound of coordinated ground fire erupted below. Both interdiction teams simultaneously engaging the ambush element before it could fire a single round at anything. She found the second shooter at Site 3, still acquiring. Not yet understanding where the first shot had come from, because the suppressor had significantly reduced the acoustic signature and the gap in the rock had diffused the muzzle flash. She fired. Then silence. Or not silence, the continued sound of the interdiction teams at Site 1, methodical and controlled. But no return fire. No shots from Site 3. No shots from anywhere aimed at the overwatch position. She cycled the scope and scanned both sites systematically. Site 3, both elements down. Neither had fired. Site 1, the interdiction teams were completing their engagement. The ambush element was collapsing. 2 of the 4 personnel she had counted were attempting to withdraw north. She tracked them. They were moving fast through difficult terrain. She had a clear sightline on both for approximately 6 seconds before they would reach a rock formation that would provide cover. She had time for 1 shot. She took it. The second man continued running. He was a problem for the interdiction teams to handle on the ground. Her job was the overwatch covering the engagement, not chasing withdrawing elements through terrain where she couldn't maintain the geometry. She keyed the radio. Site 3 clear. Site 1 engagement complete -1 withdrawing north. Interdiction teams have sight lines on the withdrawal route. Copy. Marcus's voice had something in it that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite awe, but was somewhere between the two. All teams acknowledged status. Both interdiction teams reported in. No casualties. 1, WIA, a fragment wound from a launcher that had fired a single round before the element was suppressed. Non-critical. Emily stayed in the scope. She scanned. She rechecked every sector. She would not call it clear until she had made absolutely certain there was no third element. She hadn't accounted for. No observer in a position she hadn't mapped, nothing hiding in the spaces between what she could see. 8 minutes later, she was satisfied. Valley clear, she said. Convoy can move. The convoy came through 14 minutes after her call. She watched it from the overwatch position, 23. People moving safely through a valley that had been designed to kill them through a plan built on a collaboration between an enemy cell and a man sitting 40 meters from the operations room who had spent 4 weeks carefully building trust and carefully dismantling it at the same time. She watched until the last vehicle cleared the far end of the valley. Then she began breaking down the position. Webb detained Doyle at 0847. Not dramatically. Webb was not a dramatic man. He walked into Doyle's office with 2 military police personnel and a theater CI officer who had driven through the night to be there, and he said, "Captain Doyle, you're going to need to come with us," in the same tone he used for administrative briefings. Doyle's face did something complicated. Emily wasn't in the room. She had asked not to be, not because she didn't want to see it, but because her presence would have raised questions about how the investigation had been initiated, and she didn't want Doyle's defense whenever it materialized to have a thread to pull on. Marcus was in the corridor. He told her afterward that Doyle had looked at the theater CI officer for a long moment and then said nothing, just nodded, as if some part of him had known this moment was coming and had decided to receive it without theater. Did he say anything?" Emily asked. "One thing," Marcus said. He said, "How long have you known?" "What did Webb tell him?" Webb said, "Long enough." Emily thought about that. "Webb didn't mention me," she said. "No, he didn't mention Chen either. He didn't mention anything about how we found it. He just said, 'Long enough,' and closed the door." Emily understood why. Doyle's handlers, whoever had placed him and was running him, would eventually learn that the operation had failed. The less they understood about how it had failed, the less they could adapt for the next attempt. Webb had denied them even the small intelligence of knowing which thread had been pulled. That was good command thinking. Theater CI found 3 other communication logs on the satellite device, Marcus said. goes back further than his attachment here. 2 other units, 2 other deployments. They're already running the backtrack on what he touched. 4 weeks of preparation for this operation, Emily said. He was patient. Yes. His handlers will be patient too, she said. This doesn't end with Doyle. No, Marcus agreed. It doesn't. They were standing outside the operations room in the late morning heat, and the phobie was running its normal tempo around them. Meals, maintenance radio, checks the steady operational machinery of a unit that existed in a state of permanent readiness. Nothing on the surface looked different from yesterday, but it was different. Something had been removed from inside it that had been there from the beginning. Something invisible and corrosive that had shaped decisions and outcomes in ways that would take months to fully audit. How many missions ran on his product? Emily said. 12 confirmed, Marcus said. Webb is reviewing all of them. Some of what he gave us was accurate, Emily said. The laundered product they wanted us to succeed on certain operations. Which means some of what we accomplished in the last 4 weeks happened because they allowed it. She looked at Marcus. That's the part that's going to be hardest for people in this unit to process. Marcus was quiet. Were any of those missions ones where we took casualties? Emily looked at him. Mission 9, she said carefully. The vehicle rollover that killed Corporal Harris. The route Doyle recommended ran along an embankment that the actual terrain assessment would have flagged as a rollover risk. His product described it as stable. The silence that followed was a different quality than any of the silences that had come before it. Marcus's jaw tightened. Something moved across his face that was grief and fury, and the specific devastation of a commander who has just understood that a loss he carried might have been manufactured. Harris, he said. I don't know that it was deliberate, Emily said. The alternative route Doyle recommended would have taken the convoy through an area where we now know there was an enemy pre-positioned element. Harris's death may have been a calculation trade one soldier for convoy access. Marcus's hands were very still at his sides. That's Theater CI's determination to make, Emily said. Not yours, not mine. Harris was 22 years old, Marcus said. I know. He'd been here 9 days. Emily was quiet. I know, she said again. Marcus looked at the horizon. He was holding something that had no clean outlet. The kind of grief that can't go anywhere useful, that just has to be carried until time does whatever time does with it. After a while he said, What do I tell the unit? The truth, Emily said. As much of it as you're authorized to share. They deserve to understand what happened in this unit, and they deserve to hear it from you. Some of them are going to ask why nobody caught this sooner. Yes, Emily said. And the honest answer is that it takes time to see the thing that's been designed not to be seen. She paused. You caught it when you could. We caught it, Marcus said. You caught it. Emily shook her head. You brought me into a position where catching it was possible, she said. That's different. She looked at him. You could have fought Webb on the assignment. You almost did. I almost did, Marcus agreed. But you didn't. He held her gaze. No, he said. I didn't. Something passed between them that didn't need language. The specific acknowledgement that exists between people who have been on the same side of something dangerous and come out the other end, and who understand that the things they almost did differently would have changed everything. Webb wants a full debrief at 1400, Marcus said. All unit leads Theater CI and you. I'll be there, Emily said. She started to walk away. Carter. She stopped. Reyes, Marcus said. The second step checklist you recommended, for his calculation problem. She turned. I implemented it this morning, Marcus said. Before the mission. Made him run it on the mission planning verification. He paused. His accuracy on the target grid references was perfect. First time that's happened. Emily held his gaze. Took him about 6 weeks longer than I told you it would, she said. Marcus almost smiled. You said 6 weeks. We did it in 12 hours, Emily said. He was motivated. She turned and walked back toward the operations room, and Marcus watched her go with the specific expression of a man who has spent 3 days watching his understanding of the world revise itself from the inside out. Not comfortable, not easy, but the kind of revision that makes a person larger than they were before it happened. The 1400 debrief was going to be a long one. He went to find Brant, because before anything else happened, someone needed to tell the unit what had been living inside it for 4 weeks without their knowledge, and Marcus Hale was going to be the person who stood in front of them and told them the truth, all of it, every piece he was authorized to share, and answered every question they threw at him without flinching. That was the job. He had learned in the last 72 hours from a person he had tried to dismiss before she unpacked her rifle. That doing the job well sometimes meant first being honest about how badly you had almost failed to do it at all. The 1400 debrief lasted 3 hours and 14 minutes. Emily had been in many debriefs. She had sat across from commanding officers, intelligence analysts, JAG lawyers, and congressional liaisons. And she had learned that the quality of a debrief was determined not by the rank in the room, but by the willingness of the people inside it to say the true thing instead of the useful thing. Most debriefs failed that test. People protected themselves, protected their decisions, packaged their mistakes inside language that made the mistakes look like reasonable responses to imperfect information. This one was different. Marcus stood at the front and told the unit exactly what had happened. Not a sanitized version. Not the version that made command look competent from the beginning. The actual sequence. Doyle's attachment. The intelligence product. The missions that had run on compromised data. The Valley engagement that had exposed the pattern, Emily's identification of the observer position. Chen's traffic logs. The satellite device, under the desk drawer Harris. He said Harris's name the way you say a name when saying it costs you something. The room was quiet, in a way that rooms are quiet when 23 people are simultaneously processing something too large to process quickly. Then the questions came. Reyes was first. How long was Doyle's product being cross-validated against enemy intelligence before we started using it? Theater CI believes from his first week, Marcus said. They're still auditing. Cho, Mission 9. The embankment route. Was that deliberate? Marcus held Cho's gaze. Theater CI is treating it as a deliberate route recommendation designed to create a casualty and simultaneously protect an enemy preposition. That determination is not final, but it is the current working assessment. The silence after that was different from the one before it. Heavier. More specific. The kind of silence that has a name attached to it. Tate spoke quietly from the back. Harris was my bunkmate. Nobody responded. Because there was no response. There was only the fact of it sitting in the room with all of them refusing to be managed. Marcus said, I know. 2 words. But he said them without breaking Tate's gaze, and Tate nodded once, and that was its own kind of language between a commander and a soldier that no one else in the room needed to interpret. The theater CI officer, a major named Kessler, who had driven through the night and looked like it took over at that point, and walked through the legal and investigative framework. What would happen to Doyle? What the backtrack investigation would cover. What the unit's obligations were regarding the audit of past missions. Emily sat at the far end of the table and listened and said nothing unless directly addressed. She was the technical consultant. Webb had promised not the center of the conversation, and she understood the value of that distinction. This debrief belonged to Raven Strike. What had happened inside this unit needed to be processed by this unit, not narrated by the person who had been here for 4 days. At one point, Kessler referenced her by name in the context of the Valley identification, and the entire table looked at her, and she said simply, I saw a shadow in the wrong place. Everything else followed from that. Brant, seated 2 chairs to her right, almost smiled. After Kessler finished, Webb opened the floor. 14 soldiers asked questions. Some tactical, some investigative, some the kind of questions that aren't really questions, but are the verbal form of grief, the asking of things that don't have answers, because the asking itself is the point. Marcus answered every one of them. When the room ran out of questions, Webb said, We're going to take 48 hours. Operational pause. Use it to process, to rest, to talk to each other. The chaplain is available. The medic is available. I'm available. He looked around this table. This unit has been through something this week that most units never face. A threat from inside is harder than a threat from outside because it makes you question your own judgment and your own trust. That questioning is appropriate. It's also temporary. What happened in this room today, the honesty, the willingness to face it, that's what decides what kind of unit you are on the other side of it. He picked up his notes. Dismissed. The 48-hour pause had a texture to it that Emily hadn't expected. She had anticipated grief. She had anticipated anger. She had anticipated the specific internal weather of a unit, recalibrating its sense of safety after discovering that safety had been compromised from within. All of that was present. What she hadn't anticipated was how much of that weather moved through the unit by way of her. Not because she was the person who had broken the news Marcus had done that, but because she was the person who had been new enough to see what people inside the unit had stopped being able to see, and that made her a particular kind of mirror, and people kept coming to stand in front of her, whether they intended to or not. Cho found her on the afternoon of the first day. He sat down beside her without preamble, which was unusual for Cho, who typically approached conversations with the same deliberate care he brought to everything. Mission 4, he said. 3 weeks ago, I recommended the Eastern approach over the Northern based on Doyle's threat assessment. Emily waited. The Northern approach would have been faster and tactically preferable in my own judgment, Cho said. But his product placed an enemy element on the Northern corridor, so I deferred. He paused. There was no enemy element on the Northern corridor. Theater CI confirmed it this morning. The threat was fabricated. I know, Emily said. I knew his product better than my own judgment, Cho said. For 3 weeks I let someone else's assessment override what I was seeing with my own eyes. You trusted an intelligence officer attached to your unit, Emily said. That's what you're supposed to do. My instinct said Northern. His product said Eastern. Cho looked at his hands. I went Eastern. Emily was quiet for a moment. Cho Tag, she said. The lesson from what happened here is not to stop trusting intelligence product. It's to understand that any information source, no matter how credentialed, can fail. Your instinct is also a data point. A valid one. The answer is not to choose one over the other, it's to hold both and understand that when they conflict significantly, that conflict itself is information. Cho looked at her. That sounds like something that's easy to say and hard to do, he said. Yes, Emily said. That's what makes it worth practicing. He nodded slowly. Then, you've been doing this for 11 years. Yes. Does it get easier? Trusting your own read when the official read says something different. Emily thought about it honestly. It gets clearer, she said. Not easier. You still feel the pull of deference toward rank, toward documentation, toward the thing that's been validated by a system. But over time, you learn to recognize the specific feeling of your own judgment, conflicting with something external, and you learn to sit with that conflict instead of resolving it too quickly. She paused. Santos taught me that. Cho was quiet. Your partner, he said. Ramadi. Yes, he was the best natural reader of a situation I've ever worked with. He could feel wrong information before he could articulate why it was wrong. And twice in our partnership, I watched him defer to official product over his own instinct. She paused. The third time he didn't defer. He trusted what he felt. Another pause. That's the mission we both came home from. Cho held that. I'm sorry, he said. So am I, Emily said. Every day. They sat together for a while without speaking, and the silence was not uncomfortable, but was the kind that forms between people who have touched the same difficult truth from different angles and recognized each other across it. Reyes came to her on the evening of the first day. He didn't sit down. He stood with his hands in his pockets in the specific posture of someone who has something to say and hasn't yet decided exactly how to say it. The checklist, he said. Emily looked at him. Marcus told me it was your idea, Reyes said. The second step forcing function for my calculation problem. He shouldn't have told you that, Emily said. He thought you'd want me to know. She considered that. How are you using it? She said. Reyes pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was worn at the fold lines, which meant he had been opening and closing it repeatedly. On it were 5 lines in his handwriting, a brief systematic check he ran before committing to any engagement decision. Wind range target confirmation, engagement priority exit. 5 seconds. 5 steps. Everything that his instinct rushed past in its eagerness to act. Emily looked at it. "You added exit," she said. "That was mine," Reyes said. "I always forgot to plan the exit." She handed the paper back. "That's a good checklist," she said. Reyes folded it and returned it to his pocket. "I was horrible to you when you arrived," he said. "That thing at the equipment station, you were prepping your rifle, and I came over to explain your own valley to you." "You were establishing hierarchy," Emily said. "People do that." "I was afraid you'd be better than me," Reyes said. "Which is a terrible reason to be condescending to someone." Emily looked at him. "Are you asking for absolution, or are you telling me what happened?" she said. Reyes blinked. "What's the difference?" "Absolution is what you give yourself," Emily said. "I can't give it to you. What I can tell you is that condescension based on fear is very common. It doesn't make you a bad operator, and the fact that you've identified it accurately and said it out loud, without being asked, to suggests that you're going to be fine." Reyes stood there for a moment. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone angrier, maybe. Someone who wanted us to know how wrong we were." Emily looked at him steadily. "Being angry at people for doing predictable things is exhausting," she said. "I need my energy for the work." Reyes was quiet. Then, "That's the most practical thing anyone has ever said to me about a situation like this." "Good," Emily said. "Practical is what keeps people alive." He nodded. He started to walk away, then stopped. "Carter," he said. "The machine gun position in the first valley. 840 meters in that crosswind as the first shot of a 5-target sequence." He paused. "I've been thinking about that shot for 4 days." "What about it?" "I couldn't have made that shot," he said. "Not with the time constraint, not with the target sequencing pressure, not in those conditions. I couldn't have made it." Emily held his gaze. "Not yet," she said. Reyes nodded once. He walked away, and Emily watched him go and thought about Santos, who had once told her that the best thing you can do for a person who is trying to be better is to tell them honestly how far they have to go without telling them they can't get there. She had been trying to do that for the last 4 days without knowing that's what she was doing. The twist that broke everything open happened on the morning of the second day. Kessler came to find her at 0730 with an expression on his face that she had learned to read in the last 48 hours. The expression of a person who has been carrying information and has decided it's time to put it down. "The backtrack on Doyle's previous attachments," Kessler said. "Yes. We found the other units, 2 confirmed, 1 probable. We pulled the mission logs from all 3 and ran the same cross-reference you did on the intelligence product accuracy. And, same pattern across all 3, high accuracy rate overall. 2 outlier missions per unit where the accuracy was near perfect. And in each unit," he paused, "1 fatality. Different circumstances, different mission types. But 1 fatality per unit, always on a mission, where Doyle's route recommendation or threat assessment deviated significantly from what the terrain and signal intelligence would have suggested." Emily was very still. "Harris was the 3rd, she said. "Yes. He's done this before, 3 times. "At minimum," Kessler said. "We're still auditing." Emily processed that. The cold clarity she had felt on the ridgeline when she understood the counter-sniper pair was there for her. That same clarity settled into her chest now, but slower, more complete. "He was building a pattern," she said. "Establishing trust at each unit through the accurate product, using the trust to shape 1 critical mission, then moving on before the damage could be traced. That's the assessment," Kessler said. "The specific mechanism, how he was identified and placed, who his handlers are, how the communication network functions. That's what the full investigation is trying to establish." 3 units, Emily said. 3 soldiers. Yes. She looked at Kessler. How did he get attached to 3 combat units without anyone identifying the pattern? Each fatality was investigated as a combat loss, Kessler said. No evidence of deliberate enemy targeting. No apparent intelligence failure because his product looked accurate overall. Each unit moved on, and Doyle moved on. He paused. The pattern only becomes visible when you look across all 3 units simultaneously. No single unit had reason to look beyond its own mission logs. Until someone looked at one engagement from an angle nobody had looked at before, Emily said. Kessler held her gaze. Until that, he said. She stood very still for a moment. 3 soldiers, 3 units. A patient, methodical operation that had run for, she calculated from Doyle's service record, at least 16 months without detection. He almost made it to a 4th unit, she said. Yes, Kessler said. He had already been flagged for reattachment after this rotation. The next unit was identified. If this rotation had concluded without detection... Don't, Emily said. Kessler stopped. She exhaled slowly. What happens to the unit he was scheduled for, she said. They're being notified through official channels that the attachment has been cancelled, Kessler said. They won't know why. Not yet. But they're safe. They're safe, Kessler confirmed. Emily nodded. Is there anything you need from me for the investigation? She said. Your field notebook, Kessler said. The original, not a copy. Chain of evidence. Emily reached into her front left pocket and handed it to him. She had been carrying it since the first day. The entries ran from the initial terrain analysis on the night before the first mission through the engagement documentation, the observer analysis, the traffic pattern observations on Doyle, and the ballistic solutions for the Second Valley operation. Kessler took it carefully, as though understanding what it represented. This is what broke it open, he said. The shadow broke it open, Emily said. The shadow on the ridge that was in the wrong place. Everything else was just following where it pointed. Webb called her to his office at 1100. She had not been called to Webb's office before their conversations had all happened in the operations room, or in circumstances that weren't official enough to require a formal setting. The office meant something different. She went. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, and she sat. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking with the expression of a man who has been deciding what to say and has landed on something. Kessler briefed me on the 3-unit pattern, he said. Yes, sir. You understand what that means for what you did here? I stopped the 3rd pattern from completing, Emily said, and prevented a 4th. That's one way to say it, Webb said. Another way to say it is that you identified through a single observational inference from an active engagement, an intelligence operation that had been running successfully for 16 months across 3 combat units and had evaded detection through 4 separate post-mission investigations. He paused. That is not a standard operational outcome. The position of the observer made it visible, Emily said. Anyone analyzing that engagement carefully would have seen the same thing. Would they? Webb said. Emily didn't answer that. I'm submitting a commendation, Webb said. For the Valley engagement, the intelligence identification, and the second operation. It will go up through Theater Command. I appreciate that, sir. I'm also submitting a formal recommendation that the operational integration model for female operators in this theater be reviewed. Specifically, the assignment protocols that allow a unit commander to informally obstruct an attachment before the operator has had any opportunity to demonstrate capability. Emily looked at him. That recommendation goes beyond me, she said. Yes, Webb said. That's why I'm making it. He held her gaze. What happened when you walked into that briefing tent on day 1 should not be operationally possible. The informal authority that Hale had to signal to his unit that your assignment was unwelcome before you had done anything at all. That authority created conditions that could have degraded unit cohesion at a critical moment. He paused. It almost did. Almost, Emily said. Almost is where people die, Webb said. I'm not interested in managing almost. I'm interested in removing the conditions that create it. She held his gaze. Sergeant Hale addressed his behavior, she said carefully. He addressed it thoroughly and honestly. By the time the second operation ran, this unit was functioning at full integration. I know, Webb said. I watched him do it. That's the other recommendation I'm submitting Hale for the tactical leadership citation. What he did in that debrief room with 23 people who deserved the truth and didn't want to hear all of it, that was command at its best. Emily said nothing. You're not going to take credit for the change in him, Webb said. He changed himself, Emily said. I gave him accurate information. What he did with it was his. Webb looked at her for a long time. How long have you been doing this? He said. Not the sniping. The other thing. Walking into units that don't want you and making them better than they were before you got there. Emily considered the question. 11 years, she said. Since the first unit. And nobody has documented it, Webb said. Because the nature of the work means you move on before the change is visible, and by the time it's visible, you're in the next unit starting over. That's the job, Emily said. It shouldn't be, Webb said. It should be studied, replicated, taught. The way you read a unit's dynamics within 48 hours. The way you intervene without creating resistance. The way you change behavior by demonstrating, rather than confronting. He stopped. That's a methodology. It's not just personal capability. Emily was quiet for a moment. Sir, with respect, she said. I came here to do an overwatch job. I did the overwatch job. Everything else was consequential. Consequential, Webb said. 3 units ago, 3 soldiers died because this operation was running and nobody saw it. You saw it in 4 days. That's not consequential. That's the whole outcome. She held his gaze. What are you asking me, sir? Webb leaned back. I'm not asking you anything right now, he said. I'm telling you what I observed. What gets asked formally through appropriate channels is going to come from people above my pay grade in the next few weeks once Kessler's report reaches theater command. He paused. I wanted you to hear it from me first, so you'd have time to think about what you want. What I want, Emily said. Yes, what you want. Not what the system wants. Not what would be most useful to an investigation or a policy review. What you want. Emily looked at the wall behind Webb's desk. She had spent 11 years inside the system, inside its ranks and its assignments and its structures, moving from unit to unit, doing the work, carrying the weight of what the work cost, and then moving again. She had never thought of it as a trajectory toward something. She had thought of it as the work itself, one mission at a time, each one complete in itself and then finished. She thought about Santos. She thought about his instinct, which was the best she had ever seen, and how he had died because he trusted it one time after a career of being told that instinct was insufficient without documentation. She thought about what she had told Cho. About holding 2 data points simultaneously, the official read and your own read, and not resolving the conflict too quickly. I want to keep doing the work, she said. But I want the people I do it alongside to be treated as though their capability is the relevant variable, and everything else isn't. That's what the recommendation is for, Webb said. One recommendation doesn't change a system, Emily said. No, Webb said. But one person who keeps showing up and keeps being undeniably excellent creates conditions that make the next recommendation easier, and the one after that. He held her gaze. You've been doing that for 11 years. You know it works, or you would have stopped. Emily held his gaze. Howe was right. She did know it. Not because anyone had told her, and not because she had decided it philosophically, but because she had lived it, mission by mission, unit by unit, shadow by shadow, and the evidence had accumulated. It was slow. It was unreasonable that it should have to be this slow. There were days when she was exhausted by the slowness of it, in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. But it worked. Thank you, sir, she said. Dismissed, Webb said. She stood. At the door she stopped. The recommendation for Hale, she said. Make sure the citation specifically mentions the debrief. Not the tactical execution, the debrief. Anyone can be a good commander when things are working. What he did in that room when things had been broken, that's the harder thing. Webb wrote something down. Noted, he said. She walked out. Marcus found her at the range for the last time on the afternoon before her reassignment orders arrived. She was not shooting. She was sitting on a bench with her hands resting on her knees, looking at nothing specific, doing the kind of thinking that doesn't look like thinking from the outside, but is the most active internal work a person can do. He sat beside her. Neither of them spoke for a while. The phobia ran its rhythms around them, the hum and clatter of operational tempo, the radio voices, the sound of men doing the 100 small things that add up to a unit being alive and functional. Orders came through, Marcus said. This morning, Emily said. I leave tomorrow at 0600. Where? Can't say. He nodded. He had known she would say that. The unit is going to be different, he said. After you. It was going to be different anyway, Emily said. Doyle's operation would have continued. Another mission, another route recommendation, another soldier on a path that was designed to get them killed. She paused. The unit was already inside something different. You just couldn't see it yet. We couldn't see it, Marcus said. You could. I came from the outside, Emily said. Outside is where you can see the edges of things. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what you said, about Harris. He stopped. About how the third soldier was always going to happen because Doyle had been running the same operation across 3 units and it had worked twice. Yes. If you hadn't been assigned here, Marcus said slowly. If Webb had sent anyone else, or if I had successfully pushed back on the assignment. Don't do that, Emily said. Carter, I mean it, she said. Don't go down that path. It doesn't lead anywhere useful, and it costs more than it gives you. She looked at him. What happened is that it didn't go that way. Work with what is not, with what almost was. Marcus held that for a moment. Is that how you carry it? He said. All of it, Santos, the missions that didn't work the way they were supposed to, the units that... He stopped. I carry it by doing the next thing, Emily said. The next mission, the next position, the next shadow that's wrong in a way I need to understand. She paused. I don't put it down. I don't pretend it isn't there. I carry it and I keep moving, and the moving is what makes the carrying possible. Marcus nodded. Then after a moment, I owe you an apology, a real one. Not the acknowledgement I gave you in my quarters on the first night that was honest, but it wasn't complete. Emily waited. What I did in that briefing tent, Marcus said. The way I said what I said loud enough for the whole unit to hear. That wasn't just an expression of my own doubt. It was a signal to my unit about how to receive you. It set the conditions for everything that followed. Reyes at the equipment station chose comment about the approach, all of it. He looked at her directly. I shaped the environment before you had a single chance to demonstrate anything. And I did it in front of 23 people who took their cue from me. Emily held his gaze. You changed it, she said. Not fast enough. No, she agreed. Not as fast as it should have changed, but you changed it honestly, which matters more than speed. She paused. The unit followed you into that change. That's because of how you led them through it. They followed you first, Marcus said. They saw what you did in the valley before they heard anything from me. Then we both did our part, Emily said. Marcus looked at his hands. Tate asked me this morning if there's any way to request a specific Overwatch operator for future missions, he said. I told him assignments aren't requested like that. He's going to be exceptional, Emily said. He already is. He just doesn't know it yet. I know, Marcus said. I'm starting to see it. When he figures it out, she said, don't let him get loud about it. Marcus looked at her sideways. Was that aimed at someone specific? It was general advice, Emily said. For your whole unit, honestly. He almost laughed. Not quite, but almost, which was enough. They sat for a moment more. When this gets written up, Marcus said. The commendation, the CI report, Kessler's investigation, your name is going to be on a lot of documents. Yes. People are going to know what you did here. People are going to know what happened here, Emily said. There's a difference. Marcus looked at her. She stood. She picked up the empty range bag beside the bench and slung it over her shoulder. Take care of Tate, she said. And make Reyes use the checklist. Every time, not just when he remembers. Every time, Marcus said. She started walking. Carter. She stopped but didn't turn. Thank you, Marcus said. For not going to Webb the morning of the first day. For coming to me first. She stood still for a moment. You were always going to hear it, she said. I just wanted to know who you were before you heard it. And, he said. She turned her head slightly. You were worth telling, she said. She walked off the range and didn't look back, and Marcus Hale sat on the bench in the afternoon heat and watched her go, and understood that what had come into his unit 4 days ago dismissed, doubted, underestimated, before she unpacked her rifle had left it fundamentally different than it had been before. Not because she had wanted to change it. Because she had simply been without apology, without performance, without ever once raising her voice to prove a point exactly what she was. And when the pressure came, as it always came, and the valley went quiet, in that particular way, that meant something terrible was about to happen, or something terrible had just been stopped. It was her hands that were steady, her eyes that found the wrong shadow, her mind that followed the thread from a single anomalous position in a field notebook entry to an intelligence operation that had killed 3 soldiers and would have killed more. She had not needed them to believe in her. She had only needed them to get out of the way long enough for the work to speak. And the work, as it always did when she gave it the space to be honest, had said everything that needed to be said, with 5 shots in a valley, with 11 minutes and a wrong shadow, with a satellite device found under a desk drawer, and with a debrief that told the truth to 23 people who deserved it. On the day she left the unit was better than it had been on the day she arrived. That was the job. That had always been the job. And Emily Carter had never needed anyone's permission to do it.